Pod This. My name is Andy Moore. Thanks for being with us again this week. I should really push that fader button a little harder. Listeners, thanks. Welcome back to another episode. Thank you to everyone who reached out with additional kind words of support and condolences following my episode last week, where I shared about my father's recent passing. It's good to feel loved. I hope that you also extended that to other people in your own lives and let them know as well, right? Hug them tight. This week, man, what a doozy. So this last week, I was at the NCSL Summit. NCSL stands for the National Conference of State Legislatures. It's basically a trade association for state legislators and their staff, right? So it's a big annual conference. They have multiple conferences. They're a huge organization. I attended this last year as well. This year, there's about 5,800 attendees. And I don't know how it breaks down, but a big chunk of them are members of state legislators from across the country. Met a bunch of folks from Alaska, had really great conversations with them. Unexpectedly, people from New Mexico, Iowa, Missouri, Colorado, just, the random folks you meet at a conference. You sit down at a table for lunch and you just have no idea what you might learn about another state. And then I was there on behalf of my national organization, the National Association of Nonpartisan Reformers. We had a bunch of our members that had booths in the exhibit hall that were there talking about various kinds of electoral reform, right? So things like open primaries and ranked choice voting and campaign finance reform. It was really robust. Really, that's such a hokey word to use to describe a conference. It was a good conference. Lots of great conversations. Saw some of our own Oklahoma legislators there as well. Had a chance to visit with some of them. My takeaways, real quick, not that you ask, but you get it anyway because it's my podcast. It was good. I went to sessions about redistricting. In fact, Oklahoma's own Quinn Doe, who's the research lead. I forget her actual title. I should have looked this up. Anyway, she was in charge of redistricting for the House back in 2020. And so I kind of got to work with her through that process. And she was there really to share about Oklahoma's efforts towards transparency around redistricting. And it was good. She had a lot of good questions people ask. It was really good information. And it was a good reminder, right, that Oklahoma did have the most transparent redistricting process in state history, I think. And still, we have so much work to do, right? Like, it could be so much better. For one, we could take redistricting out of the hands of legislators and give it back to the people because politicians shouldn't get to draw their own districts, right? Fundamentally, that's where I'm at. And I know many of you are as well. And I anticipate, right, that this conversation will continue. I'm going to press pause for today because it's August of 2024. And we've got more important fish to fry this year. But as we move towards the census in 2030, as we move towards the next redistricting cycle, I think we should bring up this conversation again. It's still an ongoing issue, and until we get politicians out of the process, I think across the country, we're going to continue to see inroads of corruption into redistricting. All right, all that to say, it was a really good session. It was informative. Another speaker spoke about engaging your state Department of Corrections. There was a speaker all about redistricting commissions, independent and otherwise. It was all very good. A lot of the elections work that NCSL does, it's just top-notch. Great data, excellent data. They have smart people doing really good work year-round. They gave updates about ballot initiatives around the country, about the partisan breakdown of legislatures around the country, what happens cycle to cycle for the last 30 years. What does that tell us about what might happen this year? While I was there, of course, the Harris campaign announced her running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. I didn't get to meet anyone from Minnesota, but I was really hoping I would, just to kind of see how they were feeling that week. And it was good. The last day, they have partisan breakfasts for the two major parties' caucuses. Sadly, there's not yet enough independents or other parties to have their own kind of caucus breakfast, but the Democrats, I guess, had White House advisor Tom Perez He was labor secretary. Gosh, I'm recording this in the morning on Friday, and my brain is not quite as sharp as it is in the afternoons. Anyway, Tom Perez spoke to the Dems. Mitch McConnell, because we were in Kentucky, spoke to Republicans. I didn't attend either one as an independent voter and not a member of a legislature, nor either political party. I stayed home and had breakfast at the Residence Inn, which was perfectly adequate. All in all, really great conversations, really great democracy happening. And it is odd to me, like a little funny, to go to this huge event full of partisan elected officials, and at the event, at no point did it feel partisan, right? Like there was, for me at least, maybe those breakfasts that I didn't go to probably did, but most of the sessions, it was legislators who were earnestly trying to learn how to do their job better, like how to be better at governing, right? So if you go to a professional conference for your industry, right, if it's in healthcare or finance or, window replacements, whatever it is, like you often receive education about how to do your job better, right? New products, new thinking, new testing, and then just like professional development. And that's what this was, by and large. It was really interesting. And on the last night, we did get to go to Churchill Downs, which was pretty cool. I think I heard that the Kentucky State Legislature had to pass some sort of resolution to allow Churchill Downs to host a very brief horse race for us. We didn't get to like wager or anything. They did give us some mint juleps, which I appreciated as someone who loves bourbon. Anyway, great week. If I owe you an email, I'm way behind. Moving, losing my dad, and then going to a conference has made the last month a little bumpy. But not near as bumpy as it's been for State Superintendent Ryan Walters. I'm going to play our Ryan Walters background music here for just a moment. If you saw the news yesterday on Oklahoma Channel 4, News 4, or KFOR here in Oklahoma City, you may have seen an interesting article about, yet again, Ryan Walters in the news for his handling of money at the State Department of Education. And not just him specifically. This is really more of a State Department of Education thing, but he's the head of it. And as we have already well documented, when money comes through his fingers, sometimes some of it goes missing or gets redirected. So this was a story written by, let me get the name right, credit to the reporter on this, Spencer Humphrey at KFOR, who I'm going to turn off the music because it's hard to think straight about serious issues when you've got the theme to Debbie Does Dallas in the background. Golly, so this is about school security, and this ties in with so many other things. Just even a very brief recap, right, of what's happened the last 5 months, right? Back in March, the OSDA website suddenly showed that there was no attorneys working for the Department of Education. In early March, there were, and then by the end of March, they were all gone. And they just had disappeared from the website without any fanfare, which prompted some people to start asking questions of like, do we have a general counsel on staff, or is the superintendent just going rogue on his own? Because that's probably not ideal. Since then, that was in March, and then fast forward a few months, there was plenty of consternation during session, and along the way, even the legislature subpoenaed, right, used their subpoena authority to subpoena Ryan Walters to come speak to them about what's happening exactly over there at the State Department of Education. And the first time he came, it did not go well, right? And it went so poorly that the legislature told him to leave and to come back when he was better prepared. And he also didn't come to the first couple of times. So it was like a real power struggle. And I think this is touchy because technically the State Department of Education is under the executive branch, and the legislature is obviously the legislative branch. So there's some separation of powers there. And Superintendent Walters is independently elected by voters, right? He doesn't really have a boss other than us. And he's clearly not responding to voters. And he's also not responding to the legislature as readily as they would like. When he did come finally to present, the meeting went fairly well. It was not as contentious as earlier meetings had been. And then over the next several months, just so many things happened. Like, I'm just going to read these just headlines from KFOR. Not even all the news outlets out there. It's just one. Thankfully, they linked to in this story. So after the headline about OSDE no longer has lawyers on staff, according to their website, the next one says OSDE paying Texas-based company $50,000 to make social media videos. Then, state lawmaker calls on legislative leaders to start impeachment process against Superintendent Ryan Walters. I believe that was the Democrats calling for it. A little bit later, Governor Stitt says Walters and OSDE need to be held accountable due to the U.S. News rankings fiasco, where they really ranked Oklahoma's schools like way, way low. Next one. Former State Department of Education staff says Walters, not them, is to blame for missed federal grant funds, right? This is an ongoing issue where districts are saying, hey, we don't have the money that we're supposed to have. And it seems like it's because the State Department has not applied for those grants. Next one, Democrats renew Walters' impeachment calls. Stitt praises OSDE staff exodus. That last part is still bananas to me, that a bunch of State Department of Education staff resigned because of, ostensibly because of dysfunction in the agency. And Stitt's comment was like, well, it sounds like we just got rid of a bunch of bureaucrats and shrank the size of government, which was the way wrong thing to say. And I think fundamentally the wrong way to think about this, right? These are public servants who serve a public good. They work to ensure that we have the best public schools we possibly can, and that is not happening. And we have fewer staff to do the work. It is definitely not happening. Next headline, former OSDE staff say Walters, that's the same one. Okay, go down. This one says, she couldn't wait to work for Ryan Walters' administration. Now she's worried public schools won't survive the rest of his term. That's a hell of a headline. Next one, Republican lawmakers seek Attorney General investigation of OSDE advisor Matt Langston. And this is from June, so just a couple of months ago, where news had kind of been coming out from various news outlets that Ryan Walters had ordered OSDE to contract with this Texas-based PR firm. And then Matt Langston, who was, I think, Walters' campaign manager, also worked there, and that they were paying them a decent amount of money. But then there was all these other expenses that kind of went along with it. And Langston was often the one sending out press releases or responding to news inquiries, or even just generally being a Twitter troll in defense of Walters, kind of, but also just, it seemed, if you were on Twitter a few years ago when Governor Stitt had someone named Carly Atchison, I think, as his PR person, and she was just really trolly on Twitter, so it's been a lot like that. Anyway, that all brings us to yesterday, I guess, to Thursday when this came out. This article's posted on August 8th, and they say at the bottom there's going to be an update today. And so by the time you listen to this, we may have more information. But the headline is, OSDE attempts to deprive schools of rollover funds for safety, security enhancements, despite previously promising them. And this centers on coming out of the tragic school shooting in Uvalde, Texas in 2022. That following year, in 2023, the Oklahoma legislature passed a couple of bills, House Bill 2903 and 2904. 2903 was the policy, 2904 was the funding mechanism for it. And these bills together created a new school security revolving fund, right? So like a bank account, essentially. And into that, they appropriated $150 million for a 3-year pilot program to help schools do improve school security. Hire school resource officers, do other capital improvements, right? So there was the state invited or requested assistance from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security to basically do an audit. And they came into the whole state, went to every district, every school, looked at every camera, every door, every, flow, all that stuff, and issued a big report with a bunch of recommendations. Like you got to replace these cameras. You need to keep these doors where they're locked to the outside during, all those kind of stuff, like all the flow we have. If you've been to a public school recently, it's way harder to get into than when I was in school, and much more, we'll say, protected. Rather than changing gun laws, we are trying to protect our kids and, with cameras and steel doors and all that. And I'm not opposed to protecting kids. I just think maybe there's more than one way we could approach this. Regardless, the Homeland Security issued their guidance, and all the districts were like, this is really helpful, but we don't have the money to do this. And so this fund was set up, and the way the law is written, it basically says it's $150 million over 3 years. Not more than $50 million can be spent in any given year, cumulatively, right? And the amount of money that would be granted down to school districts is like an equal amount of money for every school district. And that's like a little weird to me too, because if you're a tiny school district in like rural Oklahoma and you only have 100 students, that's very different than like Oklahoma City, where they've got hundreds of thousands of students. And if both districts get the same amount of money, like maybe it should be proportional in some other way based on facilities or students or something. But I think the idea is this money would just go to pay a school resource officer. And so there it is. Not a panacea, but something. The law stipulates that this money is to supplement, not supplant, right? So this is new money coming in to be used for that. And apparently that hasn't happened. So the news story spoke to several superintendents who say that the State Department of Education has denied them access to the leftover like year one funds. So basically it comes down to like $96,000 per year per district. And some districts said they had asked early on, like, if we don't spend it all this year, does it roll over? And OSDE had said yes. And in fact, on their website, it said yes. There was on the FAQ page, it said like, do funds roll over? Yes, they can roll over. And because you might need to spend, you might not have a chance to spend it all in 1 year, or you might need to save a little bit for next year to buy something bigger, right? Like if it costs more than $96,000, you're going to need, more money there. And so they had said yes. And now they're saying no. They're just saying you can't get it. And so KO4R talked to a couple of legislators, State Rep Eddie Dempsey, who's from McCurtain County down in the far southeastern corner, right? He's from Valiant, but like Idabel is the, quote, big city around there. And also to State Senator Adam Pugh from Edmond, and State Rep Mark McBride, who he and Pugh have been like two of the main education gurus in the legislature the last few years. And these bills they passed last year, House Bill 2903 and 2904, were passed with bipartisan support. I think there was only like 1 or 2 no votes on them. It really went through as a good deal. And now that districts can't access this money, they are really concerned. And in fact, when they went in to check their account balances to see how much they had left over, it showed zero, and they weren't told why. And so, according to this article, the superintendents called OSDE for an explanation, but didn't get a response. They reached out to state legislators, who then reached out to OSDE. It didn't get a response, and didn't get a response. And then, once the heat got turned up enough, they finally got a couple of passive responses, just like at the end of July, so just in the last few weeks. And they noticed that on the website, the question, is rollover allowable, was now gone. It had been taken off of the website. So KFOR did good reporting, right? Like most everything is archived somewhere on the internet. And they went back several weeks and found where it was on there, and then they found now that it's gone. And so that's obviously like a change in policy. And now districts want to know, like, is this accurate? Like, is this the way it's supposed to be? And also, why didn't you tell us before you changed it? And more importantly, is it even allowable? Like, because didn't the law say we could do this? So finally, there was a memo just the other day on Wednesday sent from OSDE to Senator Pugh from their general counsel. So I guess they do have attorneys there now. And that memo from the general counsel argues that 2904, which was the funding bill, prohibited schools from rolling over unused funds from year to year. And KFOR linked to that memo in the article, and I'll link to the KFOR article, although if you go to kfor.com, I'm sure it's on the homepage. And Senator Pugh says that's not accurate. Like, basically, the senator is saying the way that OSDE is interpreting this is incorrect. They had fiscal attorneys for the legislature that helped with this. They wrote it. I just pulled up the bills, and I'm not an attorney, but let's look at them together. So, House Bill 2903, which is an act relating to school security, authored by Roger Thompson, Chuck Hall, Adam Pugh, Senator Stevens in the Senate, Wallace, Martinez, Luttrell, and Baker in the House. And certainly that's just who authored it, but those are a lot of the leadership in both chambers. It says it's a new law. It says the State Department of Education shall establish and maintain a 3-year pilot program known as the School Resource Officer Program. And we'll just scroll on down, all the definitions. New law. Hereby created in the State Treasury a revolving fund for the State Department of Education to be designated for the School Security Revolving Fund. The fund shall be a continuing fund and not subject to fiscal year limitations, meaning there's no cap on how much they can bring in each year, because it's money that's appropriated by the legislature, but they could also have a bake sale, they could get grants or whatever, they could go into that. That's how it's set up. And so then you scroll down and kind of explains what they should use it for, right? Establishing and maintaining a school resource officer program and providing physical security enhancements for schools, including but not limited to school resource officers, cameras, gates, lighting, locks, doors, windows, security geofencing, and ballistic storm shelters. Ooh, they could even use it for storm shelters. That's pretty rad. Then down in second to last paragraph, it says expenditures from the school security revolving fund shall be made upon warrants issued by the state treasurer against claims filed by the blah, blah, blah. Expenditures from the school security revolving fund shall not exceed $50 million in any fiscal year and shall be divided equally among every public school district in the state. And so I read two sections here that are the thrust of what the OSDE council is saying, and saying that this is created, that it's not subject to fiscal year limitations, but then it says that all money must be shall not exceed $50 million in any fiscal year. And together they're kind of asserting that this basically means that it does not roll over, even though they already said that it did roll over. And this is, at the end of the day, like, the districts just want to know, do we have money or not? Like, we thought we had money, and if now we don't, where did it go? This reminds me of about 7 or 8 years ago, the State Department of Health had a big fiscal mess. And it was right around the time we started this podcast. So those of you who've been listening from the beginning, you may remember we did a long timeline, because over about a 14-month period, it became clear that the state had been doing like the little coconut shell game, like moving money from one account to another until they got a grant and then moving it back. And like, if you're borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, eventually that gets really messy, right? Like, some of that is normal accounting procedures, but it's sometimes, especially when it's dedicated funds like this, if you start borrowing from one to pay another, you're counting on future income to help cover that. And if that doesn't happen, you're in a bad spot. And I worry that OSDE is suddenly in a bad spot, because all of this is coming out on the heels of districts districts stating that they were unable to meet their budgetary obligations because they had not received big federal dollars from the State Department of Education, even though they were supposed to. I think earlier last week, some districts said that they'd been promised money, it has not arrived, and so they were having to lay off staff, cut programs, all of this just weeks before the school year starts, right? This is the worst time for these schools to have this kind of crisis. And now, as the school year starts and schools are in the process of enhancing their security for the upcoming year, to open their bank account and see it was zero when they might have had tens of thousands of dollars in there is terrifying for them and scary. And I would expect that we will see higher pressure from the legislature, higher pressure and inquiry from the Attorney General, and higher pressure and a inquiry from the state auditor. And I haven't seen it yet, but I would assume that the AG or the legislature will request a forensic audit by the state auditor and inspector general of the State Department of Education. And that'll take weeks or a few months to complete. I also feel like they already did one that I think Walters requested, looking into what his predecessor, Joy Hoffmeister, may or may not have done. And I don't remember the outcome of that. But man alive, just reading this story today, it was much longer than I anticipated, much more detailed. And at the end, the reporter says they will have more information. A programming note: on Friday, News 4 will have a deeper report detailing Representative McBride's calls for Walters to be impeached and other Republicans' calls for Walter to be held accountable. And this is like a big, I think, important point as well, is that I'm not saying the Democrats were wrong in calling for his impeachment earlier in the session, but politics being what they are, I think we all know that when a super minority party calls for something as big as an impeachment, it's probably not going to go anywhere, right? I'm not saying it's even politically motivated at that point, but politics being what they are, it is unlikely for the majority to agree. However, several months later, right, as more information has come out, as more things keep happening, things are not getting better, seem to be getting worse. And now that you have an article that almost entirely, I think it entirely cites comments from Republicans, right? Dempsey, Pugh, McBride, others. It means that tide is turning. Now, McBride has been critical of Walters for a long time. Pew has been increasingly critical as well. But then, like Representative Dempsey from, far southeastern Oklahoma is not a voice you would typically hear in the news criticizing another statewide elected official of his own party. And so if there's, I think politically, well, maybe the cracks that are happening in the party are not about the party. Maybe it is a greater recognition that Superintendent Walters and or his administration has been doing the wrong thing for quite some time, and that enough is enough. None of this even includes the other side of the State Department of Education, which is not the department, it's the State Board of Education, on which Ryan Walters also sits, that has been ordered by the state Supreme Court and or the AG to rescind their authorization of a charter to the St. Isidore Catholic Church. It would be a public school run by a church, right, by the Catholic Church, and receive public dollars. It would be the only one of its kind in the whole country, or the first of its kind. We're hoping it won't be the first. We're hoping it won't be the any. But that is embroiled in lawsuits both at the state level and pretty soon going to the federal level, which we all know is the point. But for right now, the state has ruled against the charter school and against the State Board of Education, and yet they haven't done it. And this is like, I think about this line of accountability a lot, right? That who are these people accountable to, and where are the checks and balances that should exist? For Ryan Walters, for the legislature, for the AG, they're all elected by voters, right? Us, like the buck stops with us as voters. Now we can go into a conversation about closed primaries and who really is responsible for people winning and not. But ultimately, we'll just say with a broad brush, right? The buck stops with the voters. Within that system, though, like there are some checks and balances, right? Like the legislature should serve as a check on the executive and the judiciary branches. The executive branch should serve as a check on the legislature and the judiciary. And then the judiciary, right, on the other two. You get how it works. It's like a Venn diagram. In our current power structure, when one party controls all three branches, sometimes political aspirations, political goals get in the way of governing in a way that a lot of people don't like, including those who are like in those offices, right? As one example, I think, it's broadly speculated that Attorney General Gentner Drummond is going to run for governor in 2 years. It's also broadly speculated that Ryan Walters will run for governor in 2 years. And so if you're AG Drummond and you're looking at this and you're trying to decide, do I prosecute or do I charge, right, Superintendent Walters about something? You've got to decide, like, is how like airtight is this case, and will this case just come across as mere political attacks rather than legal consequences? And I'm not an attorney or a lawyer of any kind, and so I think I just imagine, like, internally that's kind of the line of, like, how does this help me or hurt me for other aspirations I may have? We all, as voters, right, like, we want to believe, at least me, I want to believe that elected officials do what is good and right in the eyes of the public. And I guess even that statement is a political statement. But I think, now that I'm saying this, I feel tight. I'm have my arms crossed. I'm kind of squeezing myself here out of frustration at this whole situation. How did we get here? Why are we month after month after month tolerating what, by all accounts, is an immense amount of dysfunction in our state Department of Education, which is I think the largest agency in the state, the one that gets most of the appropriations. And the consequences are so important for the future of our state, right? OU President Haraz, is that how you say it? Now I'm questioning myself. But anyway, the president of OU just this week had a presentation where he too said, hey, listen, if Oklahoma's going to get ahead, if we're continue to grow and prosper and evolve as a state, we've got to fix our education systems, both higher ed, which is where he works, and common ed or public ed. And the number of students that are coming out of our public schools that are well equipped for college and for the workforce is way lower than we need it to be, way lower than we want it to be. And I'm sure that some people will say that is evidence that our schools are failing. And maybe that's the case, but then you got to ask why. And if you say on one hand, well, our schools are failing, and then you ask why, and you have so many news articles week after week after week after week of the State Department of Education not even applying for federal grants, not giving the money to the state or to the districts, disappearing money that the districts thought they had, right? Hemorrhaging staff, losing lawyers, losing accountants, losing the people that know about policy, that know about curricula, that know about finances. One starts to worry, right, that this might be on purpose. Either someone is just really hapless and making these mistakes along the way. Maybe they're just mistakes, and it's because it's personality. Maybe that's the case. I don't think so, but maybe. But if that's the case, we need to get a handle on that, and quick. The flip side could be true as well. It might be intentional. This could be a systematic destruction of our State Department of Education. And if you are not okay with that, good. You shouldn't be okay with it, right? If you don't fund education properly, you're going to get what you pay for. You're going to get what you pay for all the time. It makes me think of that scene from The West Wing where Sam Seaborn is explaining his position on education.
Education is the silver bullet. Education is everything. We don't need little changes. We need gigantic, monumental changes. Schools should be palaces. The competition for the best teachers should be fierce. They should be making six-figure salaries. Schools should be incredibly expensive for government and absolutely free of charge to its citizens, just like national defense. That's my position.
That's my position too, honestly. Sam nails it, right? Education is everything. It is a silver bullet. Schools should be palaces. You just heard it. Go just rewind it and listen to Sam again. He's much more eloquent than I am. But if you share that, or even if you just are upset about this current situation, if you just want there to be less dysfunction in our State Department of Education, you want kids to get a good education, and you want the money to be in the account where it's supposed to be, or you're concerned about what happened to it, here's what you can do. You can call your legislators. Every single one of you lives in someone's district, State House, State Senate. Call them, send them an email, tell them you saw the story on KFOR and you want answers. Go to candidate events, go to forums. When they're knocking your door, ask them about this. Make this an issue. This is a tremendous time for this to happen for voters because they all need our votes, right? Even those who just got elected, maybe got elected by default because they weren't challenged, are concerned about the outcome of this election. And if you can make this about this issue, then you have way more power in shaping the future of Oklahoma than you think, right? Ryan Walters is not on the ballot this year. A lot of lawmakers are not on the ballot this year. but this issue can be, right? Indirectly, you can make this issue an important issue, and you should, and we should. Education is an immensely important issue. So whatever you're doing now, pull over, stop cleaning your kitchen or whatever, and take 5 minutes to contact your legislators about this. I'm going to make a form. We'll help you. You can go to the show notes of this episode, and there's a link in there that says contact my legislators right there. Boom. We'll set it up for you. It'll be editable, so you can put in your own words, send it to them right now to let people know how you feel and that you are legitimately concerned about this. The people demand answers. All right, on that note, thanks for being here, right? Go team. Let's fix this. All right, it's supposed to be a rainy weekend in most of Oklahoma, and we were hoping to do some voter reg this weekend. We'll see how that goes. We will be keeping an eye on the sky, staying forewarned, all those things. Do what you can. If you're not going to help register voters this weekend, take your time to email your legislator, ask about what's happening in the State Department of Education. Where is the money? Where is the money? All right, folks, have a good weekend. Hug your friends, your relatives. Tell someone you love them. And we'll see you next week.